And I'll introduce you as well. This is working. Yeah? It's working. I just checked. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My mic's gone off. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hello.
Can we start, please?
Just have a few.
Can we start?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to the session here today. We'll be talking in the session about the world of work and the way it's changing, and understanding in particular what governments can do to make sure that women can ride. Oh, the electricity's gone. Oh, no problem, we'll just wait for it to come back. Is my voice, oh, the microphones are working, okay. So we're going to talk about, the translation should be fine as well. Okay, so I'll just start again. So welcome to everyone. We are going to be talking in this session about the world of work, the way it's changing, and understanding what governments in particular can do to make sure that women can ride the tide of this change and not be drowned by it. The session has been jointly organized by the ILO, by UN Women, and by ESQA. And ESQA, as you know, is our host for this whole forum. So to open the session and to welcome everyone here, I would like to ask Ms. Merinaz Al-Awadi, please. She's the director of the ESQA Center for Women in Beirut, to please make the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, but I need some light so I can read my statement. Maybe a mobile or so. My flasher is not working.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I'll put it here. لا كده تمام شايفة ميرسي. صباح الخير جميعا.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to welcome you. Allow me to thank and to welcome the speakers at this session, which is related to the future of work and impacts on gender equality, motherhood, work, and the care economy in Arab states. I would like to thank you for being here with us, and I would like to thank you for your participation. We are very happy to gather here today in order to discuss. تسمعون الترجمة? Can you hear the translation? Can you hear the translation? It's working.
Is it working like this? الترجمة شغالة? I think they're saying it's...
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Let's check. As soon as I stood up, they were really afraid.
ميرسي. طيب. الترجمة شغالة؟ Working? Okay. برحب بحضراتكم.
So I would like to welcome you, ladies and gentlemen. I would like as well to welcome the speakers at this session on the future of work and impacts on gender equality, motherhood, work, and the care economy in Arab states. I'm very happy to meet and to gather in order to discuss a subject which is related to women empowerment and to equality and to gender equality, and therefore to facilitate the implementation of the SDGs in the Arab region. Ladies and gentlemen, I recall the image of a young girl who used to work hard at school and who used to learn her lessons. She would grow up and she would achieve her dream of obtaining a university degree. She faces in life several obstacles. Her family is convinced that the most important family chores and responsibilities lie on her, and her main role is at home, and therefore she cannot go to public life but when accomplishing everything that everybody would consider to be her responsibility in her own environment. Amidst this concept, which translates into a method of learning, if this girl is lucky enough, she could actually start working within the approved and accredited patterns. Now, the approach of the community to this girl accompanies her and can affect the legal perspectives and frameworks, the ones that govern her daily activities. The condition of this girl is actually the condition of many girls and women in the Arab world, those who are faced with different patterns and challenges, and those who may not participate fully in the public spectrum. And this is actually holding prejudice to women's participating in the capabilities of women and her capability of benefiting from sustainable development. The main changes that the world is witnessing and which is applicable to the Arab country, in addition to the changes that the region is witnessing, is actually increasing the scope of challenges and showcasing new challenges that are related to a woman's participation in public life, which could actually involve her in unpaid care, which is considered to be one of the most impediments to her participation. Now, the image is very blurred, and despite the developments occurred in the life of women, and despite the positive changes in the legal frameworks, nevertheless, a woman's participation in economy and politics is still well below the expectations in the Arab countries. Among the most important challenges is the lack of any development, or even actually the relapse in the Arab countries when it comes to examining equality between or gender equality. And this is very important if we are to discuss the situation in different countries, and which goes hand in hand with different economic circumstances and conditions. The opinion surveys show that in different Arab countries, most of the men contribute or support a woman's work outside her home, provided that this does not actually affect her activities at home. And most of the men believe that they are required to abide and to follow on the activities undertaken by women at home, and they as well determine that a man is supposed to work as a priority compared to women, and that this is actually entrenched within actually the inefficient activities and within the inexistent investments. Women are required actually to find solutions in order to be capable of matching between her daily activities and between her chores at home and the upbringing of her children, because this is very important, and women are not supposed to have other women taking care of their homes. And the question is the following: if we are required to introduce change, where shall we start from, and how can we actually accelerate this change? This is a question that will be answered to by the speakers at this session, and here it's very important to showcase the connection between the solutions that will be discussed today, because of course fragmented solutions will not remedy the problems and will only lead to wasted humanitarian solutions. Thank you very much. And humanitarian resources. Thank you.
Interesting issues already being picked up there that we will cover during this session. Before I introduce the speakers today, I just want to make an announcement on behalf of the organizers that the session is being live streamed. The camera is up in front. So there's a request that if you want to move around the room for any reason, which I hope not to pass in front of the screen, please. Okay, so to talk about the issues today, I'm very excited about the panel that we have with us. They're all experts in their field, so I think we have a lot to learn from them. On my left is Dr. Magid Usman. He's an expert in social statistics and public opinion research. He's a former minister with the Egyptian government, and now he is the CEO of the Egyptian Center for Public Opinion Research, Basira, and he's also a professor at the Faculty of Economics and Statistics at Cairo University. On my right is Yulka Gadowski. She is the Regional Program and Policy Specialist on Women's Economic Empowerment for the UN Women Regional Office for the Arab States. Her areas of specialization are governance and economic empowerment, and she's worked for UN Habitat, UNDP, and UNHCR. Sorry, I just dropped my thing. Across from me, we have Iram Bukhari and Rana Musle. Iram Bukhari is the secretary, she's the founding secretary of the Women's Development Department in Punjab, Pakistan. And her department and her as an individual are recognized for several groundbreaking initiatives in gender responsive public service delivery. So we'll be hearing a little bit about those. And Rana Musle is head of the Gender and Social Studies Department at the Social Security Corporation in Jordan. She's a certified gender audit expert, and she has extensive expertise in conducting gender audits in social security schemes. So thank you to all of you for being here, and I look forward to hearing from you. So as I said, we're going to look at the world of work and how the world of work is changing. The ILO had some research commissioned recently through the Global Commission for the Future of Work, and there were three main trends that have emerged, or three main influences that are going to change the way the world of work is structured. One is technology. So technological innovation is going to create jobs, but in this process, in this transition, there are going to be people who are going to lose jobs as well. How do we equip those people to take up new opportunities? Climate change, the second trend. As we move towards the greening of our economies, we're going to find new jobs in these new green technologies and sustainable practices, but other jobs that previously existed in carbon and resource intensive industries are going to be lost. What do we do about this gap? And then demography is another important social shift, where you have expanding youth populations in some countries, aging ones in others. That's going to place a pressure on labor markets and social security systems, definitely, yet in these shifts are new possibilities. Experts sometimes add two other important trends. One is the global integration, the global economic integration, and the second is skills shortages. So given this scenario, I want to ask Dr. Magid Usman, first of all, that what do you think about these trends? Do these trends hold true for the Arab countries as well?
I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to this session. I'm going to talk in Arabic. بشكر المنظمين على دعوتي للمشاركة في هذه الجلسة
I thank the organizers for inviting me to take part in this session, and since I represent a minority of men, I would like to thank you for having men amongst you. In fact, the structural changes that were referred to by Mrs. Frida will definitely affect the entire world. However, they will actually affect the world in a way that is not equal. Looking at this slide, which showcases the number of jobs that the world will be losing and the ones that it will be winning as a result of the expected changes, then we can see that we have 133 million jobs that will be added between in 2022, in the next 6 years, and we will be losing 70 million jobs. Looking at these jobs, maybe we can have an idea about the course that we need to follow in order to increase women's empowerment and working opportunities in the Arab world. We are witnessing a paradox in the Arab countries. Education has improved, however, employment is still suffering from a major gap with regards to providing job opportunities. Moreover, it's important to consider the following. If we are discussing women's empowerment, then we must not burn steps. It doesn't mean that we can go through all the steps related to creating job opportunities in a traditional economy. And here I call upon you to look at the lowest part of the slide, where you have the number of jobs that will disappear. We have the data entry clerks, where we have many women working on this. Nevertheless, we have the call centers. And there are as well some jobs where women are concentrated. However, looking at the upper part of the slide, we can see that many jobs will be created and that they are related to artificial intelligence and are related to data sciences, to analysis and to big data. Therefore, anyone who is considering the economy of the future is supposed to take this course, and therefore the programs related to the capacity building need to take into account this metamorphosis and this transformation. Second, looking at artificial intelligence, well, on this slide we can see the revenues generated by artificial intelligence in the markets worldwide between 2016 and 2025. We are talking about around 50 folds in less than 10 years, which means that this is a major transformation that will take place in artificial intelligence, which will generate important revenues worldwide. And therefore, it is important to examine the changes that are not linear, that are exponential. And if you look at the changes occurring in the world, in the first decade of the millennium, then we can look at the example of India, where the process outsourcing or the business process outsourcing in India, where we have the startups having showcased an increase of 2.8 million persons who are working in this business, and this is only within a decade. Looking at the second decade, well, we have a company which is called WeChat Pay, which between 2012 and 2017 has actually registered an increase which encompasses 600 million persons, and therefore which translates into $8 trillion. So I'm talking about the revenues of artificial intelligence, which is very important and will create job opportunities in the Arab world, provided that they take the proper stand. And therefore, the jobs show that there is a lack of data. We have data regarding developed countries, regarding China and India, but we do not have any information related to the Arab countries. Looking at this slide, we can talk about the care economy. Now, the different sectors that we have here: builders, care products, education. The first actually line speaks about advanced countries, the second one about developing countries. And here we can see that the only activity where we have an increase in the developing and developed countries alike is actually the care providers, which means that the care economy will definitely provide more job opportunities in the developed and in the developing world, including the Arab countries. And I believe that this session could actually showcase the importance of this point. And this is definitely due to demographic changes and to the technological changes. And this will affect as well the size of the work of women and the different levels. Now, the slide which is in response to your question is actually a slide related to the biggest 46 countries having the capacity for automation, a larger capacity of automation. Now, looking at the countries of Africa and of Asia, we can see that some Arab countries are actually showcasing among the 46 countries, the 6 GCC countries: Qatar, Emirates, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, KSA. And in Africa, we have Morocco and Egypt. However, what's very interesting is that the GCC countries are expected to be more automated compared with other countries. And this slide shows that Egypt and Morocco do not rank less importantly compared with the GCC countries. So they are ranking second after Qatar which is actually the best ranking country in the GCC. This is related to the priority of automation, and here we have capacities in the Arab countries to proceed with automation. And these women will definitely be given their share of development, a question that we need to respond to, because this is actually burning steps instead of involving women in traditional sectors. We can actually move to the sectors of the future and not the sectors of the current times and the present. Thank you.
So definitely it's quite clear that there are risks, but there are opportunities as well. Because we're looking at the role of governments in particular, what do you think, Dr. Magid, what do governments need to do in particular to equip women to take up these opportunities and not to lose out?
يعني أنا أعتقد إنه هناك دور.
I personally believe that there is actually a complex role of the governments. However, there's as well a very important role to be played by the civil society and by the private sector. And these are the roles that could be very important when it comes to the roles of the government. I will be dividing them into 5 groups. We have first the rights of women. And here we can see that the available technology will allow for protection and for the upholding of rights for privacy and the protection of women against harassment or gender-based violence online. Because online as well, we have harassment that's taking place, and the new technology will definitely be capable of governing this issue. We have as well an investment in large-scale campaigns that can eradicate gender violence by means of the social media and the new technology. Another block is related to education and skills, the development of skills and empowerment. We have several opportunities and several measures that governments have to take, especially when it comes to investing in the ICT training and in supporting teachers and supporting the education of women and children. However, science and technology and engineering and math, these are subject matters that showcase actually a large priority and the majority for men compared to women. If the percentage does not increase, then access to technology will definitely be an obstacle to women's access. Talking about access as well, access to technology requires the internet ICT. We have mobile phones, mobile money. All this has to be made available to citizens in all regions, including the disadvantaged areas where we have people who are actually deprived of higher education and of work, which will definitely produce a breakthrough. We have as well the financial inclusion, which is something that is developed in several countries. Governments need as well to develop and to nurture an environment for the broadband that is more inclusive. And here we can talk about the free internet access in public places. And if this is well planned, it could enable women to access electronic services, especially in those areas that are conservative areas and where women's involvement in the public life is very limited. We have a 4th point related to content. The relevance and the user-friendly approaches and contents are still unavailable on the net, be it from the government or from the private sector or from the internet operators. We need as well to adopt gender equity goals when it comes to the ICT and when it comes to providing the available or the required resources in order to enable women to benefit from the 4th industrial revolution and from the technical tools that will actually unveil themselves in the future.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Usman has identified quite clearly science, technology, ICT as being the emerging sector where a lot of opportunities are going to come up for, emerge for women. Further good news is that ILO research shows that women do want to work. I'm just going to highlight the Arab states. The blue bar and the yellow bars show that a majority of men and women believe that women should be in paid jobs. But when we look at the green bar, which is the actual female labor force participation, we see that's much lower. So there's a big gap between ambition and reality. And when we ask about the main reasons for women not being in paid work, and if we think of this in terms of the ability of women to take up these sorts of opportunities that Dr. Usman highlighted in his talk, we can see that the main reason for women not being in paid work is because of the unpaid care responsibilities that are on them. In the world, it's also the largest reason, about 40%, but for the Arab states, it's almost double. So we have more than 70% of women who want to work but say that the main reason they're not in work is because of the unpaid care responsibility on them. This again just emphasizes the same point. The yellow bar shows the amount of time spent in unpaid care work, and you can see that for the Arab states it's many times. I think it's about 7 or 8 times more than it is for men. And that then has a direct impact on the way the world of work is structured. Now, we already have very few, for instance, women in positions of management and leadership in the world, but for the Arab states, it's the bottom line, so it's the lowest, unfortunately. And if we look further, these are managers, women and men, with or without children. And if we look at the Arab states, the blue bars show the women who are managers who have children, and you can see that that is a much smaller number than women who are managers without children. And for men, actually, there seems to be a reward rather than a penalty. That there are far more men who are fathers who are managers rather than the other way around. So there's definitely a block there, and that block seems to be unpaid care work. So I'm going to ask Yulka that how do we address this?
Thanks, Rita. Maybe I should just basically reiterate the fact that the care work is a crucial element, of course, for the human well-being, as well as an essential component also and contributes to the economic development, as well as a productive labor force, not only the current labor force of today, but also the future labor force. Care work, especially unpaid care work, often goes unrecognized. Even if it is known that it is a very big contributor to the economy. Worldwide, if we look at the number of working hours, about 41% of total working hours in the world are actually unpaid care work, and of course the majority are a burden of women or are done by women. In fact, unpaid care work and domestic work are actually valued to be around 10% and 39% respectively of GDP. So often they contribute more to GDP than some of other economic sectors such as manufacturing or transportation services, for example. It was said also by other speakers before, unfortunately unpaid care work is disproportionately falls on women worldwide, and this is considered to be one of the root causes of gender imbalances. Basically, the gender imbalance in the distribution of care work is a root cause for inequality and also for both for the economic and social disempowerment of women. I'm not going to repeat the statistics. I mean, it was said that globally it's basically at least 2.5 times more women take unpaid care work compared to men, and in the region this is higher. It was also said that there is a little bit of discrepancy if we look at the level of education enrollment of women in the region in the past decades. I mean, this has improved quite a bit, but this is not in fact mirrored yet in the labor force participation of women. And obviously there is a number of interconnected factors that contribute to this low participation of women in the region. It was mentioned, the legislation was mentioned, access to services, access to resources. Also in this region more so the expectations and gender roles as well. However, one way to basically try and address the issue of very low labor force participation in the region could be investing in care economy. So basically, this would imply recognizing, reducing, and redistributing the unpaid care work as a way to address some of these interconnected factors and promote the increase of women's participation in the labor market, but not only, because investing in care economy, it has shown that it actually contributes to human development, but also creating job opportunities in the sector of the care economy, but also beyond the sector of care economy itself. And of course, when we talk about care economy and we talk about investing, public investments in the sector, governments around the world hesitate because of the magnitude of financial resources that are needed to invest in the sector. However, there are examples already out there that show that investing in the sector actually brings back returns, sometimes even more than the usual sectors where the governments put money in, such as the construction sector, for example, which we know usually generates jobs that are more basically a male-dominated sector. Unpaid care work, of course, also tackles a number of sustainable development goals. We're not talking about its effect, investing in the care economy, we're not talking only about its effect on gender equality, but we're talking about its effect on poverty reduction, on health and well-being. We're talking about the generation of decent job opportunities and also reduction of inequalities as well. I'm going to quickly just mention a few policy actions that came out from an issue paper that was basically published by UN Women last year. And it focuses on the 3R strategy, which I believe was a strategy coined by UNDP, I think in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And calls upon basically governments to look into basically to use this kind of approach when it comes to investing in care economy, but also at the same time, of course, promoting women's empowerment. So first, we start with the recognition, obviously. So the first step would be to recognize that this is actually a type of work. And by recognition, we'd not only, I mean, that would mean basically to start by including or capturing unpaid care work through the statistics, basically including it as a part of national statistics. But also when it comes to, because when we have statistics, we can actually evaluate how much does the unpaid care work contribute to the economy or contribute to the national income in general. But more so, the issue paper highlights the importance of having, of addressing the care economy from a national level or coordinated, in a coordinated manner. For example, often different elements of the care economy fall within different ministries. Let's say social protection is covered only by sometimes by Ministry of Labor and Social Policies, depending on the countries. And then the hours, for example, of daycare, they're usually regulated by Ministry of Education, for example. So if there is a national coordination, there are examples. I think Belgium is one of the examples where this national committee decided to basically harmonize the working hours of the daycare with the working hours in the public or private sector, so it would be easier for both parents to actually drop off the kids and pick up the kids after the daycare. So this is just one of the examples. Another policy action that is recommended as part of the recognition is also the compensation of unpaid care work through social transfer. However, I mean, here it is highlighted very much that we need to be cautious in the policy design and the implementation of such cash transfers, because often they tend to basically institutionalize even more the gender imbalance when it comes to distribution of care work. The second part, of course, the reduction, meaning the reduction of unpaid care work, the burdening of care work on women, but also for the society as a whole. but here without compromising on the principle of access to universal and quality care as an important element when it comes to the design of policies. There's two major policy actions that are recommended. One is public investment in social care service and infrastructure, which has the potential to transform a substantial amount of unpaid care work, domestic care work, into paid social care work. And the second policy action is public investment in physical rural infrastructure, which normally reduces the amount of time needed to basically complete the unpaid care work at home. And this would free up the time of women to basically contribute this time on more productive activities. And often in rural areas, this would actually translate into more children attending education. Often boys and girls tend to drop off school because they are expected to, I don't know, pick up water miles away because of the lack of physical infrastructure in rural areas. And the last one, in terms of redistribution of unpaid care work, both in market, in paid market work, but also within the household. The policy actions suggested are basically reforming, let's say, labor market regulations for a better work-life balance. And here there's obviously policies related to care leave or care insurance policies, regulation of workplace hours I mentioned earlier as one of the examples. And then also policies that eliminate gender discrimination in the labor market. And by this we mean basically preventing the discrimination by employers when it comes to hiring, promotion, wage levels, etc., for the same type of work, and so on. Because we know that in the end, when it comes to women's decisions into joining the labor market or not, this is influenced by the amount of free time they have to be able to contribute these hours in the paid economy. But also, this is also linked with the incentive that men and women get from the labor market. So if there is the same incentive from the labor market, then the decision, let's say whether the woman or the man join the labor market is going to be the same. But right now the incentive is different. Unfortunately, we know that the likelihood of men getting higher, let's say, salaries for the same job kind of influences the decision between the man and woman on who is the one who should stay home and take care of the child and who is the one who should be more active in the labor market. The benefits as well, of course, in a number of countries in the Arab states, if the man is working, I think it's related to the public sector mostly, but either way, the man gets the benefits if there is a child in the family, but the woman doesn't, according to the legislation. So this said, if there is equal incentives for men and women to join the labor market, then there is basically a more equal, let's say, or fair opportunities to have basically women get equal opportunities to join the labor market or not. It will contribute to boosting the labor force participation of women. And I will end by saying that, of course, a reformed care economy sector has the potential to improve macroeconomic conditions by creating employment opportunities, as I said, by boosting the consumption demand, increasing the worker productivity, as well as facilitating inclusive growth from which both women and men and boys and girls would benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Yulka. So there's a compelling argument for states to invest in the care economy, whether it's in terms of the generation of jobs, in the terms of generation of GDP, and we have some examples of how that could be done. But a lot of countries, when we talk about the government investment in the care economy, they say that it's easy for richer economies. So the best examples come from Nordic countries, for instance. But what about countries that have smaller economies, more struggling economies? They might have competing demands. Is it really, I'm going to ask this question to Iram, is it really the state's responsibility to look at the care economy, childcare for instance, if it's an issue of supply and demand, if the demand is there, so the supply will follow surely, or if it's an issue for parents to sort out, is it something that the states should be concerned about, especially those countries with constrained resources?
Thank you. Yes, I firmly believe. Let me introduce myself. I'm Iram Bukhari, and I have an experience of working in the government as a bureaucrat for the past 27 years. And I'm the, currently I am, this is my second tenure as the secretary in charge of the women's development in the Punjab. So Pakistan is basically a country of 200 million plus people, and more than half of that population, that means more than 100 million people, live in the Punjab, which is the largest state by population. And I work for women's development in the largest populated province. So that means that when I'm speaking about whether the state should invest in the care business or not, I'm talking about a state whose population is more than the population of many European countries. So I'm talking about 100 million people, and 50 million plus of that population comprises women in the Punjab. So what we do in my state, it practically means that we have applied it on half of the population of my country. So yes, the state has seriously a serious business of venturing into the care economy. And for that, I wouldn't go to the gender equality argument that we all like to take as women practitioners who we like to talk about the gender thing. I say that it's important for the economic growth and development. So it's smart economy if you're talking about investing in the care business. And why do I say that? It's because if you look at the global level, Farida shared some very good reports from the ILO, and they stated, I was going through that last night, and it says that out of the 7 billion population in the world, at least 2 billion require care, whether directly or indirectly. And out of that, 1.8 billion are children in the world who are under the age of 6, who do require some form of care. And we all know that directly those 1.2 billion children are going to be looked after by women, whether it's mothers or nannies or daycare attendants. And then there's another 0.2 billion population in the world, which comprises of men and women who are above the age of 65. So the life expectancy age, if they cross that, then these 0.2 billion people in the world also need some kind of care. And since globally we have left the business of caring for the young and the old to women, it means that there is a kind of a time poverty that Yelka was mentioning, that if women are spending more time in looking after the young and the elderly, obviously it leaves them less time to invest in the labor force, in a formal labor force and the workforce. And when they do not invest in a paid work form, obviously that means that they do not contribute and they do not get registered as being a part of the national development and growth. So my argument is that if any country wants to actually raise its GDP, raise its economic growth, then they need to bring women into the workforce. And that is exactly what we are attempting in Pakistan, which is obviously not a very rich country in terms of the resource and in terms of the patriarchal model and in terms of the Islamic limitations that are cultural and Islamic. We are more like the Arab countries where we have a patriarchy and where women are by birth, after birth they are nurtured to be the caregivers rather than be playing a very active and dynamic role in the workforce. But in Pakistan we are, alhamdulillah, actually implementing that, and we've been doing that for the past 6 years. Yes, I think the state has a business in investing.
I'm going to come back and ask you for some examples, but I just want to begin with some examples from Jordan. So Rana Musle, I know Jordan has done some very interesting work around social insurance for maternity protection. So I was wondering if Jordan too is a middle-income country, but you've taken the choice, you've made the decision to invest in maternity protection through quite a creative model. If you could tell us about that, please. Do you want this? Yeah. I'm sorry, it's a bit awkward that they have to pass this around.
صباح الخير. بداية
Good morning. First and foremost, I would like to give you a briefing on motherhood in the social security system in Jordan. The maternity insurance, in definition, is to cover the salaries of a working woman during her maternity leave, which extends to 70 days. According to the Jordanian Social Security Law and Article 42 of the law, the resources of covering these salaries by monthly contributions that the employer gives to the social security system by 3/4 of salaries of those insured, whether male or female, without any discrimination based on gender. What are the reasons that led to establishing the maternity or motherhood insurance? We have many reasons. Firstly, to reinforce the participation of women in the labor market and to increase the number of working women and to encourage employers to employ women, and also to have a stable economic situation by women. When we help women by helping them work, i.e., the revenue will be further raised and she will be able to better cater for her children and to educate her children in a better way. And later on, she will have a retirement a pension, which will give her a certain stability after retirement. And this is the most valuable reason that most social security systems in the world strive to achieve. The legislation of motherhood insurance from a legal-based approach. How did this idea come to life? It came first, or it stemmed first from international legislations as well as Jordanian legislations that were enforced, such as the Jordanian labor law and the Jordanian constitution. By virtue of the Jordanian constitution, Article 23, paragraph 2 stipulated that the state should protect work and establishes its own legislations in order to regulate the working conditions of men and women. Also, Article 27, paragraph A of the Constitution stipulates that an employer does not have the right to stop the work of a pregnant woman or to give her a notice to stop work after her 6 months of pregnancy. Another article says that a woman has the right to have a maternity leave that is fully paid for 10 weeks. And the area after a delivery should not be less than the time after the delivery should not be less than 7 weeks. The Constitution was inspired by the international agreements and mostly the second part of the International Labor Convention, in a way that the majority of these international conventions or local laws helped frame motherhood from a legal-based approach within the social security system. One of the most important conditions and obligations to ensure motherhood in Jordan is the following. Firstly, the contribution time of the insured woman should not be less than 6 contributions that are consecutive and should prove her delivery thanks to a formal birth certificate. Secondly, a pregnant woman has the right to have a maternity leave before her delivery day by 4 weeks as a maximum time. It will be a pre-delivery leave, and also she has the right to have 4 delivery stages during her work. And why does motherhood insurance in the social security system is considered as important? Because even if the facility that employs men only, the motherhood contribution is taken from them, and that is why the concept of equality is applied, and the employer is further encouraged to employ women. And here, some deductions will be taken from both men and women without any discrimination, and thereby they apply the concept of equality. And this insurance was imposed in order to ensure equality between men and women, and to encourage the protection of her rights, and to encourage employers to further employ women, and to encourage the active role of women economically. As for the other factors, we can mention economic factors and social factors. Out of the economic factors that can lead to this motherhood or maternity insurance is to have an economic insurance for the working woman, because the maternity leave gives many economic benefits that will safeguard the purchasing power of this woman, and also to safeguard the technical female working force, because according to studies, the labor force of women is concentrated in nursing, medicine, or in the education sector. And therefore, these women should be able to maintain these positions after the end of their maternity leave. And thus, they will have this female technical force forever. And furthermore, this will protect the private sector from any work conflicts, because the rights of women are all settled even during maternity leave without any conflicts between this working woman and the employer. As for the social factors, we can mention a good, healthy upbringing factor for the newborn by his mother, and when there is a financial stability, especially during the first part of the maternity, the family will be or will enjoy more cohesion, and this is what we call the parental care, and there is a great relationship between the maternity leave and the motherly care that can be achieved thanks to the maternity leave. Amongst the most important statistics that the National Institution of Social Security has, we note an increase in the number of Jordanian women and non-Jordanian women that enjoy maternity leave since 2015 to date. Of course, this maternity leave is somewhat new. The number of Jordanians has increased, and the maternity leave is given to Jordanian females and non-Jordanian females according to the labor law without any discrimination. And this ratio has increased up until it reached 10,169 Jordanian females and around 900 Jordanian female non-Jordanians. The work of women is somewhat scattered between the medical sector and the educational sector. And we can count around 7,700 women having maternity leaves in these sectors. The cumulative ratio of the female beneficiaries since the application of the system since 2011 has reached a very high percentage. As for the average of maternity leave for women by the Social Security Fund has reached around 55 million dinars. Thank you for your attention.
So this is a very important way of helping women make the transition from maternity back and return to work. But what about when women have come back to work? Then how can we redistribute the care responsibility? And as I speak, I'm painfully aware of the fact that we are still talking about childcare in particular being a woman's responsibility, and we haven't tackled how to make it, or how to increase the understanding of it and the acceptance and the recognition of it as a shared parental one. But nevertheless, I'm going to ask Iram, please, to share some examples from Pakistan of how once women come back to work, and hopefully parents, how to make their care responsibilities easier for them.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to send this back again.
Oh, that's okay. You can just
Okay,
put on the
I'll do
slide.
it
That's
for
all
you.
right.
Okay, yeah. Okay, nice.
Okay, so like I was mentioning that in Pakistan, at the government level, we have realized that according to our population, if you see that the colors are not showing properly, but you can see that the population are almost equal of men and women in my country. But on the right-hand side, it's the labor force participation. And if you see, it's mostly men who are working in Pakistan. And we realize that this is actually not a good representation of women in the workforce. And we need to work forwards from here. So this is the situation as it is right now. We have the Pakistani average of women's labor force participation is only 25%. And of women who work. And out of those 25%, our recent surveys tell us that only 4.5% of those 25% women who are working actually, only 4.5% have access to childcare. And that access to not having access to childcare and not having residential facilities if they're working out of home, which means that a double jeopardy for women who are working mothers, that if they have children to take care of, and if they get transferred or if they find a job outside their homes, which in most of the cases, everyone in the country does not find a job in the same city where they belong. So for women, it becomes a double jeopardy, that where do they stay and who takes care of the children when they're staying in a city where they do not have any childcare support. So in my province, which is more than half of the population of my country, we have been investing in childcare as a well thought out policy since the 2012 year, the year in which the department was made. And I have the humble honor of being the founding secretary of this ministry in my province. So the policy is basically something that I envisioned in 2012. And since then, we have been investing in creating daycare centers in a public-private partnership mode, where actually the simple slogan is, your place, my grant. So which means that any organization in my country, in that half of the country that I'm talking about, anyone who comes up with a dedicated space according to international standards, and we have 3 categories of daycare centers. So one is for up to 7 children, the other is for between 8 to 13 children, and the third category, which is the largest, is between 14 to 25 children. So anyone, and we have allocated space per square yard calculated on the amount of space that is required for each child. So according to the international standards, if any organization, whether it's government, whether it is semi-government, whether it is private, if they come up with a space, that's all that we need. And we give them a grant. We give them a grant that covers the entire cost of furniture and equipment for the daycare. It covers a year's salary of the entire daycare staff, and also the utility bills for a year. So these 3 components are covered by the government grant. It's a grant, not a loan. So you do not have to return it. And the equipment stays with the organization. Within a year, since we pay the salaries, we pay the utilities, our model successfully shows that with this 169 million investment so far and 5,200 children benefiting, we have not a single daycare out of the 89 that are already working, and 113 means some are in the pipeline. So out of those 89 daycare centers that we established and we paid for a year, not a single one has actually closed down. Because in a year's time, the daycare is able to stand up on its own, and it generates enough revenue after a year to make it self-sustainable. So the model is actually very successful, alhamdulillah. And recently, on the 8th of March, the International Women's Day, we celebrated that with a big bang, and we simplified the procedures. If there was any red tape, I found that there was too much information being asked for, and people were unable to, organizations were unable to fill the form, in a fast way. So I cut down the requirements and tried to make it simpler, and I fixed timeline that the day the form comes up to the government and my department, we are going to do it, establish it within 2 months. Earlier there was no timeline. So when we announced that, and we did a big awareness campaign on the social media and the print media, published ads asking people that now the form is easy. It only takes 2 months for you. Just show us the space. We're going to bring the money. The money is ours, the space is yours. So you would be delighted to know that our social media presence, since the Facebook records the number of visitors that visit a particular site in a day, before we started reaching out to the people with this message, before that, the average visitors on my website, which is www.gov.pk, before this awareness campaign and simplification of the procedures, the average visitors were about 2,000 per day. And when I started doing that, my team brought up these charts, graphs, showing that the average visitors per day had gone up to 17,000 per day, which shows that this is something that is so missing and what people really want. And interestingly, the daycare centers that we have established, and these are pictures from the actual daycare centers. So these are not lifted from the internet or Photoshop. These are actually working, and some of them have been working since 2013. Right? And they're all self-sustaining now. So this is a model that we intend to go in a big way, and for the next financial year, we are getting another 200 million from the government. And the daycare thing that is, interestingly, it's not just women who are bringing their children to the daycare centers, it's also single men. It's also men who have some issue of taking care of their children, even if they're married or single, and they bring their children as well. So the next, please. So here in Pakistan, since we have a vision, Pakistan is going to be 100 years old, inshallah, in 2047. And we have a development roadmap. Where do we want to take our country, and where do we envision ourselves in 100 years' time, because that is when we'll be completing 100 years. So we plan that from 25% labor force participation of women, we want to make it close to 47%. And for that, obviously, we are investing in a big way in facilitating women to join the workforce. And one is obviously we investing in that. We are also going to bring, my next plan is to bring in legislation for standardizing the daycare services within the entire country. Because for the private sector that is operating, and they are actually managing and establishing daycares on their own, I want that the state should bring a legislation where there should be a regulation, and there should be standards that should be followed, because right now when I talk about daycare centers, I'm talking about the government grants. But there is a huge private sector that is also establishing daycare centers. So we're thinking of bringing legislation for that. The next thing that we're doing is for women, because when we talk about women, it's not just women with childcare responsibility. Like I said, we're also introducing a new Women Hostels Authority. This is a regulation. We have made a law for that. The law is ready. It has been approved by the chief executive, who is the chief minister of the province. And under this law, we are going to issue licenses to the private sector, to any person who has a home, to turn it into a kind of a bed and breakfast thing for women, so that in one go, we can issue licenses, we're also offering government tax rebates in property tax. So we're offering them certain incentives to come and invest more and more into the residential facilities for women. And the catch here, what we've done is that anyone who gets a license from the government to establish a women's hostel, again, also needs to provide a space for the daycare. So we're going to be investing in the grants in every residential facility that is going to be established for women from now onwards. So in one go, we'll be able to issue licenses, regulate the services, and in the private sector, and encourage them to invest more in residence for women. And at the same time, we will also be investing in daycares, again through grants. If a licensed hostel is existing and functioning, it only has to provide a space as a mandatory condition, and we are going to establish a daycare through our grants. So that we personally think in Pakistan that with our ambitions to bring women in the workforce, if there are 3 things that stop women from joining the labor force, out of those three, my department looks after 2. One is the residential facilities temporarily, and the second is childcare. But for the third thing, which is transportation and mobility, my department is mandated under the law to act as a coordinator for the entire government machinery to transform it into an entity that actively practices gender equality and which works for women empowerment. So what Ms. Yelka mentioned, that there has to be coordination mechanisms. So in Pakistan, what we've done is that as secretary of my department, I am not just involved in the direct service delivery for daycare centers or for working women hostels. That's just one of my jobs. I'm mandated under the law, under the rules of business, to actually work and motivate and to bring legislation and to make policy, both the sides, the service delivery, the policy making, and the lawmaking, the legislation. All three are under my mandate. Any department or any sector where I find that there is an opportunity for women, or whether there is a gender inequality that is being witnessed through some procedures or some programs, I have the mandate under the law to actually intervene, to interact, to collaborate, and to motivate the department. And I then am the push factor. So my ministry or my department is actually the coordinator. So I play multiple roles. If it comes to anything in the human rights side, and if it is involving gender, I have the authority to go and interact with that department and to present it before the assembly if there's a law, and to take it to the cabinet if it involves a program change. So with that coordination role and with the direct service delivery, we are hoping that this is going to be something that would be replicated in other countries in the region, because if Pakistan can do it, why can't the Arab world do it? Thank you.
And thank you very much. Some very sort of practical examples. I know from my experience, it's not just employers that are setting up these daycare facilities and taking advantage of this facility, of the fund. It's also training providers. And I know one example that I saw, that there was an industrial school that set up a daycare facility using a grant from the Punjab Daycare Fund. And for the first time in the 30, 40 years history of this training provider providing these industrial courses, they had women joining as trainees. So sometimes we overlook the fact that these sorts of facilities we need to extend not just in the workplace but beyond the workplace as well, during times of training and these sorts of backwards and forwards linkages. We started late, so we might go a little bit over, but we still have sufficient time for questions. I'd like to open the floor for questions. You can ask any of our speakers here, and so please, any questions?
شكرا لكل المتدخلين وبالفعل يعني
I would like to thank all the speakers for their very enriching contribution, especially when it comes to the facts and the experiences that we have shared. It is a comment, it's at once a comment and a question. The specificities of the Arab region, which is applicable to you, Doctor, when you have talked about the opportunities made available to women when it comes to the next year's the labor market. When we talk about the Arab region and when we talk about many Arab countries, the economies of which rely mainly on agriculture, and we have a specific categories that are bringing together at the same time informal work and unpaid work. This means that rural women in our countries are undertaking many tasks at the same time. If we have these tasks follow each other, then in this case the day will actually increase to 48 instead of 24 hours. So first of all, it's bringing together unpaid work and paid work. But the paid work is actually paid peanuts and is not subjected to the social security or to protection in the working conditions. Where is this woman from the future of the available opportunities, especially that the largest number of our agricultural security lies on it in several countries. The main question is the question of actually illiteracy. How can technology provide opportunities for high percentages of women in the Arab regions, especially for the rural ones? Which means that they are not fit for entering technology to start with. So how can they actually reach areas that are not qualified, including women who are not fit for any other opportunity? Thank you very much. Thank you. In fact, you have raised a very important issue, which is related to rural women and their role in agriculture. Maybe if I had more time in my presentation, I would have said that this technological change will lead to changes when it comes to moving from the informal to the formal sectors. So it will contribute to formalizing activities. And this, at first, sounds actually disastrous for women. Because despite the improvement in education, women are still working in the informal sector. However, we need to discuss the fact that the technological changes that have occurred in the past couple of years showcases that many illiterate persons use mobile phones. And we could think that maybe illiterate persons are incapable of using a mobile. This is practically applicable to the use of technology. However, at the same time, this does not underestimate the importance of the current situation. Now, looking at things from a different perspective, we can see that the developments in technology will produce a better interaction. And this will definitely lead to the restructuring of the labor market. Moreover, the technology that is now available and that is related to the care economy will lead actually to a care mission that is incapable of developing. So when they look at the CCTV, they will see that the future will be incapable of providing this. I'm not saying that the situation will be very easy for farmers, female farmers, or female domestic workers, but the solutions we are looking into are not impossible. Thank you. Raja Abdurrahman Ali Zain from Sudan. It's not actually a question, it's an intervention, and it is related to motherhood. Any role that men can do in society is a role that women can do. However, women have an additional role, which is the biological role. And then this biological role has actually contained her capacity to develop. And God has actually granted women, when it comes to motherhood, with a double favor. First of all, when it comes to emotion, when it comes to patience, the capacity to actually shoulder responsibilities and to endure. And this is actually related this is applicable to the situation of giving birth, of carrying children, delivery, nursing, etc. And God has been very generous to women. As a country, we were supposed to wonder, how is it that we are paying tribute to mothers as a worker, but at the same time as a mother who is supposed to be entrusted with this biological role? For example, was she actually supported by means of an additional contribution, or do we see that she has actually, or she can take a long-term leave or holiday in Sudan, we have actually a 2-year motherhood leave. No, it's not full pay. We expect it actually to be with an extra pay. Because since she is supposed to actually take these 2 years off for taking care of the child, well, she's supposed to be remunerated double for the time. Men are incapable of supporting women at the times of delivery, nursing, etc. And he's not here to help her in the kitchen sometimes. If he's a good husband or if he's a brother. And we see as well that women have considered that this motherhood is very important to her life. And in the Arab countries, this motherhood has unfortunately translated into psychological stress. If she wants to be a mother, then she has actually to pay somewhere. For example, she is supposed to and she's supposed to choose her husband on proper grounds. However, considering that the clock is ticking, sometimes she rushes into marriages. So all these are problems that we have to take into account. Thank you.
I think it's important that the whole idea of the session is to look at ways and how we can make sure that women don't have to choose whether they want to work or whether they want to be a mother. And the example of motherhood leave is a good one for that. There's a question at the back, please. Yeah. And then over here. Okay.
Please ask him to use the microphone because we cannot hear him. But I think that what he's saying is that you didn't see him. He was asking to take the floor.
I'll be very quick to give you the role. My name is Rasha. I work with UN Women. I'm managing a program. It's a regional program on engaging men and boys and gender equality. It addresses masculinity in the Arab region. I'm very interested in a lot of the comments that were raised. I work in close collaboration with my colleague Yulka as well because the themes do overlap very much. Very interested in what you had to say as well and what Iram you had to say about the engagement of men and the role of men as fathers and as brothers and as leaders within the workplace as well and decision makers and people who impact policies and legislation as well. I think the conversation we're having today is very relevant to the conversation on the changing social norms, on gender socialization from a very young age, on the changing face of gender roles and on how masculinity as well impacts that and how it's changing very much, particularly in the Arab region. The role of men and boys within the household and gendered roles and how that is also taking a different effect. Now, what we will be trying to do in our coming phase of the program over the next 3 years, and we work in 6 countries in the region, in Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco, is to work on fatherhood as a prime theme. We have 4 major policy themes. Fatherhood is one, working on gender-based violence is another, socialization, and the work that we do with educators as well, and with young boys within schools to really look at those roles and how they can be more engaged in the domestic sphere, in household chores, and also in the space created for their peers of girls, and thus the opportunities that they are allowed later on in life. So I think fatherhood is a primary thing. You mentioned something about single fathers as well, and we're trying to look also as men at men as partners, as not only perpetrators, but also as their vulnerabilities as well. This is the longer term sort of the behavioral change, etc., that goes in tandem with, I think, the agenda that you're trying to address today. So I just wanted to put this on the table, and I mean, we'll have an opportunity later in the day to discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's very important. How do we shift the narrative towards shared parental responsibilities among mothers, definitely, and engaging men more? We'll come back to you. Thank you.
شكرا. أنا
I have no questions. I actually have a comment regarding the approach to women's work, which is actually an approach by many academicians and politicians who say that this is related to the cultural level and that the culture is actually giving roles to women and is separating the role of women between the private and the public sector. I personally think, and as we were saying in the network, we need to think outside the box. I personally see that the new change is for policies and government, and it's not for culture. Cultures change. And I would like to explain that what's influencing, of course, the distribution of work is not a cultural aspect. It's actually the state policies, directions. If you want to talk about culture, then let us talk about the culture of the ruling majority, because this is very important in distributing the gender roles. Let me give you an example of Yemen. Yemen was fragmented into two countries. The south had actually became independent in the 1967 from the UK, and then it reunited in 1990 with the north. And the north had actually gained its independence from the Ottoman Empire in the year 1914. What happened is the following. When the south became independent, a leftist direction was actually overwhelmingly present in the government and in the army, in the police officers. The culture changed in no time. What changed was actually the casting, or was actually the ruling authorities. When we talk about actually modernization, both the North and the South had shared the same tendencies. When the king or when the crown prince have declared in KSA that women have the right to actually drive cars, the next day women were actually driving cars. Does the culture change within the blink of an eye? No. What changed is actually the government's culture and the culture of the ruling authorities. I think that in the Arab countries, regardless of our tendencies, we are governed by traditional mindsets that do not want women to evolve or to have a different situation, because women are the catalyst of change, and should they change, the whole society will change. Let me give you the example of Yemen, where we had Aden Taiz, who wanted to follow the steps of Beirut, Cairo, and Damascus. Unfortunately now, Cairo and Damascus and Beirut and Sana'a and Taiz and Hodeidah are similar to the Hijaz, wearing the abaya and the mindset, and when it comes to the things that we hear from women, we are defending women, whereas others are now actually echoing the Wahhabite speech. Thank you very much. A comment, Farida, if I may. What he's saying is true somewhere, because Aden was the only district where on March 8 all men would take the streets carrying roses in respect for women, and this never happened in any other Arab country.
We have one question here, one there, any in the back? No? Okay. There. So 4. Okay, so these 4 can please be the last, and yeah, I think, yeah, okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this really has to be the last 5. Just very quickly, please. Questions or comments? We'll start with you. Thank you.
شكرا على النقاش. أنا الحقيقة حبيت
Thank you for your discussion. I want to actually give you the example of the role of the private sector. An example from Palestine. We've had a discussion some time ago in the bell ringing activity on the development of the financial sector, and an idea was actually that women will not only not access the labor market but to reach high ranking positions, because this involves travels, and women have to ask their husbands for their permission, which is a role that is not actually encouraged. In Palestine, there is actually a 24/7 daycare, which accommodates children any time of the day. So we are supposed to think about the type of activity that we want women to take on. Are we talking about any position or about high-ranking positions? I was very happy to hear you today in the discussion talk about the social integration and the relationship between the different generations. There is a problem when it comes to care. And here I would like to showcase the example of Turkey, where petty amounts are actually given to grandmothers who are taking care of their grandchildren, and which is actually giving them a purpose in life, and at the same time they are involved in the education of children, and to showcase that childcare is not only limited to women, but it's a matter of shared responsibility between all the stakeholders in society.
اسمي نورة أسامة مسؤولة
My name is Noura Usaiman. I am a program officer at UN Women. It's not actually a question, it's a comment on some of the points that were raised by Dr. Majid. We in the organization intend mainly to increase women's participation in the labor market. And we have as well very important programs starting from the decision making. We will not go into their details. However, there are two main programs. I personally am passionate about these programs, and I think that they could be on the short or the medium run start giving results. Now, the first one, which is not directly related to the job market, we have actually some programs that change how girls in the complementary and secondary classes look at themselves in order to meet the demands of the labor market. We are supposed to change the stereotypes of girls when it comes to the educational curriculum, and here we are working with the national mechanisms related to the rights of women in the Arab countries and the ministries of education. The project has started to give in results, and this is not only on the short term but on the long term as well. We have as well workshops for fathers and for teachers on how to deal with girls at a specific time of their learning process without actually stereotyping them into the traditional jobs. And we have as well the girls celebrating the ICT Day. It is the first time that the organization will be running competitions to girls at the complementary and secondary levels in collaboration with the ministries of women, education, communication, in order to encourage girls to have some technological creativity and the projects for artificial intelligence, and to have applications that could be useful for their communities, and more importantly for the women and the girls in their community. And we could as well raise the awareness of girls regarding the role models in the Arab countries and on the international level. These role models are women who are capable of making breakthroughs in technologies. Now, another comment which is very quick. We have started for the past 3 years developing the empowerment and training of the TOT when it comes to the startups. We have been working every 3 months on a TOT training. What was very interesting the last couple of times is that we as an organization and as an official organization, we started receiving online applicants. The training will take place in the Sultanate of Oman by the end of the year. Ladies having a very, very small-scale project who offer that they pay for their travel ticket and for their journey, because they have a project that they want to cherish and to see develop as a baby. So the mindsets are changing, and girls are submitting and offering new technologies, and women have integrated a different domain which will enable them to play their role without directly affecting their families. I know that the situation is very difficult. However, we still have hope in the short term. Thank you.
So can we just make them very quick comments, please? Thank you. Over there, yeah.
Thank you. اسمي ريم أبو.
My name is Reem Abu Hassan. I come from Jordan. I support the colleague from Yemen, saying that when we talk about the work of women, we consider the cultural aspect, neglecting the fact that there are some discrimination in the job market itself. In other words, women at work, especially in the private sector, more than the public sector, may not be promoted or may not have the first promotion very quickly. So looking at the discrimination taking place in the labor market against working women, and this has nothing to do with the culture. So according to McKinsey's study for 2015, 18% or the possibility for women to obtain a first promotion compared with men is 18%, knowing that women represent 50% of the university graduates. This shows that the policies that we have in the administrative measures at companies have to be taken into account so that we can see when there is discrimination against women. At the labor market, women do not feel that they could simply take in an administrative position because the mechanisms of discrimination are available even when it comes to the human resources promotions. And in some companies, when they need a CEO or a chairperson, they look for a male chairperson or CEO from outside the institution, knowing that many women are already occupying high-ranking positions, but the appointment is always taking place from outside the companies. Another comment, when we talk about the care economy, which is directly related to the care given to children, well, here, of course, I can look at the care economy and I can look about the importance of making it more professional, because this is actually a method of action or of an approach which is recruiting mainly women in the private and the non-private sectors. This means that the elderly, the persons with disabilities, and the children, they all fall within the care economy. And it would be very interesting to actually have a recommendation stating the importance of institutionalizing or professionalizing institutional work so that we can better contribute and ensure women's participation in the labor market.
Can I speak in French? Okay.
No.
There's translation?
Yeah?
Yeah? Okay, very good. Bonjour, Madame Yasmine Bouzina.
Hello, Mrs. Zainab. Abu Zainab from Morocco. It would have been nice to have representatives of the World Health Organization, because here we suffer from a real problem. As a mother, as a woman, I have suffered from this problem. We need 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding because it's important for both the mother and the child and to prevent any health problems later on, but we do not have any clear indications on that by the WHO, because it does not have any obligations that forces the countries to provide 6 months of maternity leave for women. In the developing countries, in Jordan, we have around 7 weeks. Or even more. In Morocco also we have lesser number of months. The woman has also or must have the right to go through her pregnancy or maternity or breastfeeding phases in a very calm and relaxed way. For that, she must be protected by the laws of her country. She should not be dependent on that choice on others. For example, I was late 5 years in my career because I have decided to stop working for 2 years between pregnancy and breastfeeding. And for my second child, I have also decided to stay at home in order to stay at home to rest from complications and from the stress of work. And with my husband, we have received our diploma in the same year, and we have taken our positions of responsibility at the same time. And I believe this is a huge problem. If we want to have a professional career and have a good family life with the same advantages, we have to work twofold, and we need to rethink the laws to protect the women, because these are the laws that guarantee this choice of life. Thank you.
I think that okay then, okay. But this has to be the last one.
I
Absolutely.
just, yes, my name is Anna Al-Kindi. I'm from Oman, Oman Economic Association. I don't see any Arab country within the glass ceiling. We are not even ranked. So that would have helped a lot. يعني ده هيساعد كثير في
This would have been helpful to break the glass ceiling.
What is the role of the UN in tackling this issue, and to think out of the box? Actually, we should stop saying only women. It is a family. يعني all the rules and regulations affecting at the end of the day the family. Europe has a quota when it comes to board members. We don't have it. Your input regarding the vacation, إجازة الأمومة يعني, it's not there. It's the same in Oman since 20 years. So it has not been even linked to the demographic change within the country. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and definitely something that we
the
need.
glass ceiling.
We need to. Perhaps that could be the theme for next year's session, looking at how we break the glass ceiling better. I want to thank everyone, our speakers and our participants for their inputs. And to close the session, I'd like to invite Mr. Greg Vines, please. He's the Deputy Director General of the ILO, and he is visiting Lebanon and Jordan from Geneva. So if you could close the session, please, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and I will try and be brief because given we are already over time, but it's been a very interesting discussion here today, and certainly from the ILO's point of view, the relevance of this to our Future of Work report is very significant, and that report, as we've heard, has identified the care economy as one of those growth areas of work into the future. But of course, whilst this has opportunities, there's also some significant risks associated with it, and part of the ILO's concern would be that because of these risks, women workers could suffer disproportionately to men's workers. And I think that part of the reasons for this are that women are predominantly working in the lower end of the supply chains. They're often working in areas of work that are the more precarious. They're often working in those areas of work that have that difficulty because of the challenge with those unpaid care work responsibilities. But the Global Commission report has its central theme for tackling the future of work as a human-centred agenda. In other words, we've got to be putting people first and let technology follow us rather than the other way around. And one of the important and significant for today's session, one of the important recommendations is its call for a transformative agenda on gender equality. So in other words, it's not good enough anymore just to be tinkering around the edges of these issues. It's really got to be a transformative one. And certainly I think we have all recognised that part of that agenda needs to be the strengthening of women's voice and leadership. It needs to be around eliminating violence and harassment at work. It's got to be around transparent pay policies. But I think one of the very significant aspects of all of this, one of the significant parts of the future of gender, needs to be a changed attitude around the care economy and these aspects of the future of work. I don't think there's any question at all, and we've heard it today, that be it cultural, be it government initiatives, be it individual initiatives, the attitude of women to this and what women are bringing to this is changing. The problem is the attitude of men isn't. Look at the room. I think I'm here with 4 or 5 other men in a room full of women. Until we have all of these seats filled by men, we're going to have these challenges. And I think this is something that, not all of these seats obviously, but more of these seats filled by men, it's going to be a challenge. And we need to ensure that we are getting the message across that this is, as a number of speakers have said, it's not an issue that can just be dealt with by women, it's a shared issue that's going to be dealt with by the whole of the community. I think also we need to make sure that when we're looking at the care economy as well, we change the attitude so that men are taking a greater responsibility on that. And as part of that, we've got to make sure that the work in the care economy is such that it is decent work for both men and women, regardless of who's working in there. And I think one of the ironies with the poor conditions and the issues associated with the care economy is that it's, to us as people, the most important part of the economy. It's that part of the economy that looks after our children, it looks after our parents, it educates the next generation. And until we can get a universal approach to taking this more seriously, I think we're going to be in, continue to have significant problems. I think the core or the key to advancing this whole area around the future of work in the care economy is ensuring that the principles of decent work apply, to ensuring that it's a sector of the economy that is formalised, that it doesn't stay in its informal, and ensuring that domestic laws and international labour standards apply equally to this work as they do to all others, other areas of the workforce. Reference was made earlier to the 5R framework, and it's important to keep those in mind. The first 3 R's relate to recognising, reducing and redistributing unpaid care work. The fourth is to rewarding paid care work. And the fifth, and I think very importantly, is the representation of workers in the care industry. Individuals locked away in houses or locked away in wherever they may be can't get the proper representation, can't make the proper progress. So it is imperative, I think, that we've got in place those mechanisms for the collective representation of these workers, for the capacity to social dialogue. So I think there needs to be a united effort, and certainly this will form a major part of the ILO's agenda moving forward in our work in the care economy, in our work with domestic workers, and in our transformative agenda for gender equality, is to be really looking at these core issues of fair wages, the right to organise and collectively bargain, safe working conditions, and of course the protection of these rights under law. But to make progress, we need to make sure we can broaden this discussion and to certainly engage more folk of my gender in these discussions as well. So thank you all very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Greg. And I just want to thank our speakers again, Iram, Rana, Yulka, and Dr. Usman. Thank you very much to everyone.